In the stillness of a snow-covered forest, after a fatal car crash leaves a baby alone and forgotten, something ancient awakens in the trees. A lone wolf grieving, wild and motherless hears the faint cry of a child not her own. What she does next defies instinct, nature, and every boundary between beast and human. This is the story of two souls, one helpless, one hunted bound by loss, guided by love, and united by a moment that changed both their lives forever. The sky was darkening fast, with thick gray clouds rolling over the mountain like waves swallowing the sun. The narrow road winding through the forest was nearly deserted, flanked by towering pine trees that seemed to whisper to one another in the rising wind. A storm was coming, the kind that swallowed light and sound and made even the bravest animals disappear into burrows and dens. Inside the little silver car, Emma Blake tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her knuckles were white. Snow had begun to fall lightly, but the road was already slick with ice. She glanced sideways at her husband, David, who sat quietly in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at the map on his phone. Their baby, Lily, was crying in the back seat, her little fist punching the air as her red face wrinkled with frustration. "She's hungry again," David said softly, turning to look at the infant. "I know," Emma replied. Her voice was calm, but strained. "We're almost there." They had left the city later than planned. The trip was supposed to be a short drive to a mountain cabin David had booked for a surprise getaway, just 3 days of peace, nature, and time together as a family. After months of sleep-deprived nights and postpartum exhaustion, Emma had hesitated, but David insisted. "You need this," he had said. "We all do." But now, in the dying light and on an icy mountain road, the decision felt reckless. "I can pull over soon," Emma said. "We'll feed her," David nodded. "There's a rest stop a few miles up." Then it happened. A deer dotted appeared out of nowhere, brown and wide-eyed, frozen in the headlights' hooves skidding on the ice. Emma's instinct took over. She jerked the wheel hard to the right. The tires screamed. The car fish-tailed. Emma single quotes. S. Heart jumped into her throat as they broke through the guardrail with a deafening crack, then plummeted down the snowy slope below. The impact came with blinding speed, a violent lurch, a crunch of metal and glass, a sharp scream, then everything went black. The forest went quiet. Even the snow seemed to pause mid-air, as if the trees were holding their breath. A raven flapped its wings and flew off from a high branch. The silver car lay crushed against an old fir tree, the front end crumpled like paper. Steam hissed from the hood. The windshield was shattered. A crack split across the roof like a scar. Inside, David slumped forward, unmoving. Blood trickled from his temple, painting a red line down his cheek. Emma's hand was still on the wheel, her eyes wide and unblinking. Her body had gone limp, though one arm had been flung backward, draped across the infant seat like a final protective gesture. For several minutes there was only silence. Then came a soft, broken cry. Lily was alive. Somehow, amid the wreckage and glass, the baby had survived. Strapped securely into her rear-facing car seat, she had been cushioned by the back of the vehicle, protected partly by the way the car had struck the tree and partly by her mother's final, instinctive shield. She cried again, her voice hoarse and muffled, more like a gasp than a scream. Cold crept in through the broken windows. The baby's breath came out in puffs. Her tiny fingers clenched and unclenched, searching for warmth that wasn't there. The night deepened, and something moved in the trees. Far above, hidden by the thick canopy, a lone figure prowled through the snow. A wolf, large and lean, with grizzled fur and cautious eyes, emerged from the shadows of the forest. She was an older female, once a mother, now alone. Her movements were silent, graceful, as though she were part of the forest itself. She had heard the crash. The sound had ripped through the night, a foreign noise that sent smaller animals fleeing, but she had stayed. Curiosity, perhaps. Or something older, deeper. The scent hit her before the scene did. Burnt metal, oil, blood. And something else. The sharp scent of fear, of life, of something very, very small. She approached slowly, eyes glowing amber in the dim light. Her paws crunched softly on the snow, leaving careful prints. She stopped at the edge of the wreckage, studying it. She had seen cars before, though always from afar. They did not belong to her world. This one was broken, silent, dead, but not everything inside was. A sound, a high, wheezing cry drew her attention. She moved closer, ears twitching. Her nose pointed to the back of the car. There, through the shattered window, she saw it, a child. The Wolf stared. The child stared back. There was no fear in the baby's eyes, only confusion, cold, a need. The Wolf tilted her head. Deep inside her chest, something ached, an old feeling she thought had died with her cubs the winter before. Her den had flooded with snow, and by the time she returned from the hunt, they were gone cold and still. She had waited for days. Howled, searched, but they never moved again. This child, this fragile, helpless thing made that ache pulse anew. The Wolf crept closer. Carefully she nudged the door with her nose. It gave a creak. The child made a sound, half gasp, half sob. She reached the baby, sniffed her gently. There was no scent of threat, only milk. Skin, warmth turning cold. She circled around the wreck. Snow fell silently on her fur. The world was still. Even the trees seemed to watch. Then, in a movement more careful than any hunter's, she took the handle of the baby carrier between her teeth and slowly pulled it from the wreck. The baby whimpered, then grew quiet again. With her precious burden secured, the Wolf turned back into the woods. Vanishing between the trees as the snow began to fall harder, she did not know what she would do next, but she knew this. She could not leave the baby behind. The snow had thickened into a quiet storm, blanketing the forest in white, erasing all sounds beneath a soft hush. As the wind picked up, it carried the scent of pine, frost, and something new, something fragile and unfamiliar. The gray Wolf moved through the trees with purpose, her paws leaving faint imprints that the wind quickly swallowed. She carried the baby in the car seat delicately between her teeth, the way she once carried her pups from danger to safety. Each step was measured, careful, the carrier's plastic edges bumping softly against her chest. She did not look back. She didn't need to. The wreck was behind her, along with the smell of blood and oil and death. There was no one left to help the child except her. The den was an hour's journey through thick forest, tucked into a rocky hillside by a half-frozen stream. She had not used it since the spring. After losing her litter to the late snowstorm, she had wandered for weeks without a destination, sleeping under roots and in abandoned burrows. Her body had healed, but her spirit had not. Her howls no longer echoed with meaning. She had become a ghost among the trees. Now something stirred in her again. The baby whimpered, her voice thin and hoarse from crying. The cold was seeping into the tiny child's bones, despite the layers of clothes and blankets. The Wolf paused, set the carrier down gently, and nuzzled the child's face with her warm muzzle. The baby blinked. No fear. No scream. Just curiosity. The Wolf exhaled, a cloud of breath rising between them, then picked up the carrier once more and continued. The journey was hard. Snow had filled many of the usual paths. Fallen branches and icy stones made the route treacherous. But she pressed on, every instinct screaming that this life, this small, human thing must be saved. At last, just as the wind sharpened into icy needles, she reached the den. It was a hollow formed by large stones and earth, with moss and old fur lining the inside. She nosed her way in first, checking for predators. Empty, safe, familiar. Then she returned for the baby. With careful movements, she tugged the carrier inside, setting it in the warmest corner. The child whimpered, too exhausted to cry now. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy with confusion. The Wolf lay down beside her, curling her large body around the seat. She could feel the baby's chill through the plastic, so she shifted closer, pressing her side to the seat, allowing her body heat to radiate. For a long time, they didn't move. The forest breathed in silence. Far above, the stars disappeared. Behind the clouds, an owl hooted once from a nearby tree, curious. A deer paused in the snow, head lifted, ears twitching. Something strange was happening. Something sacred. The Wolf slept lightly, ears alert. Every sound made her twitch a falling pinnacone, the flutter of a bird's wing, the groan of a distant tree. She was guarding the child now. She had no pack, no mate, no cubs. But for reasons she did not understand, this child belonged to her. At some point during the night, the baby stirred. A soft cough, a sniffle. The Wolf stood and moved closer. She sniffed the child, noting her dried tears and cracked lips. The baby's scent was fainter now. Her warmth was fading. She needed food, milk, something. The Wolf remembered the scent of warm prey, the blood of hares, the warmth of field mice. She couldn't give this child what it truly needed, but she could do what she could. She stood, licked the baby's forehead gently, and stepped outside. The wind hit her like knives, but she didn't hesitate. She darted into the trees, nostrils wide, eyes sharp. Within minutes, she found a rabbit beneath a shrub, its body fat with winter stores. Her kill was swift. She brought it back to the den and set it just outside, a subconscious offering to the forest or maybe to fate, inside. The baby was shivering softly. The Wolf lay beside her again, warming her, licking the cold from her cheeks. She had no milk, but she gave the child everything she had: warmth, protection, presence. The baby reached out once, tiny fingers brushing against the Wolf's fur. The Wolf did not move. The baby sighed and closed her eyes. The next morning came slow and gray. The forest was silent, blanketed in snow that muted every step and sound. No tracks led to the den. No trail marked the Wolf's path, but the Wolf was still there, curled around the baby like a shadow, her breathing steady. In the light of morning, the baby opened her eyes again. They were clearer now, less glazed with cold. Her lips were cracked, her body weak, but she was alive. She looked up at the creature beside her, this warm, breathing guardian with sharp eyes and softer gestures than any wild thing should possess. She did not cry. Instead, she made a small sound, a coo, a curious attempt at speech. The Wolf tilted her head. It was not the cry of hunger. It was the sound of trust. And so the Wolf stayed. In the heart of the forest, two creatures from different worlds, huddled in silence, one wild, one fragile, both orphaned, both alive. In each other, they found something lost, something that death could not quite take. The forest had a rhythm of its own, a slow, deliberate heartbeat that pulsed beneath the snow-covered ground. Trees whispered in the wind, and the sky wept, gently in flakes. But inside a hollow den beneath the old fir roots, a new rhythm had begun to grow, the quiet rise and fall of two breaths, one wild, one human. 3 days had passed since the crash, 3 days since the Wolf had carried the baby into the woods. 3 days since she had chosen, without knowing why, to keep it alive. The baby, Lily, no longer cried. She no longer had the energy. Her tiny face was pale, her lips dry, and her body weak. She had not fed. Her only warmth came from the Wolf's fur. Her only protection from the forest came from sharp teeth and ancient instinct. The Wolf knew something was wrong. She didn't understand the complexities of human need, but she had once fed her cubs with her own milk, licked their tiny bodies clean, stayed awake for days to keep them alive. Those same instincts now whispered that the child needed more than she could give. Still, she did what she could. Each day, the Wolf left the den only briefly. She hunted small game, rabbits, voles, squirrels, leaving parts of the kills near the den entrance as if offering them to something larger, something watching. And something was watching. The forest had taken notice. Crows perched in the trees above the den. A pair of deer began appearing nearby, curious and cautious. Even a red fox paused one afternoon, peering in, not with hunger, but wonder. They didn't interfere. They didn't flee either. It was as if some unwritten law of the wild had declared a truce. For now, this child belonged to the forest, and the forest would protect her. On the fourth morning, snow blanketed the den entrance, dimming the light within. The Wolf woke first, as always, her nose immediately pressed to the baby's face. Checking for breath. It was there, shallow but steady. The child stirred, opening her eyes slowly. Her tiny hand reached out and closed around a tuft of the Wolf's fur. The Wolf didn't move. She only watched, golden eyes blinking slowly, her breathing deep and calm. The baby tried to coo, but her voice was gone, just a dry exhale like wind passing through empty branches. The Wolf stood and padded to the den's entrance, sniffing the air. Something was different. Faint scents rode the breeze, smoke, rubber, sweat, human dough. The Wolf's ears twitched. She looked back at the baby, who was now sleeping again, and stepped outside. She saw them from a distance, bright jackets moving through the trees, voices shouting, dogs barking, though not with hunger, but confusion. The searchers had come. At the crash site, the rescue team had found what they feared. 2 bodies in the front seats, cold and broken, covered in frost. The baby seat was gone. There was no blood trail, no sign of wildlife attack. Just nothing. Some assumed she had been thrown far from the car, buried in snow. Others assumed animals had carried her off. But one man, Ranger Cole Hartley, didn't believe in assumptions. He had grown up near these woods, tracked deer and foxes as a boy, followed cougar trails in the dark. He knew when something was natural and when something wasn't, and this was not natural. No wild animal carried off a child in a car seat and left no blood. No scent trail. No broken bones. Something else had happened. He followed his gut, venturing deeper into the trees, away from the official search area. He moved quietly, leaving the dogs and radios behind. He listened, watched, waited. And then through the stillness he saw it. Wolf. Tracks. Not fresh, but not old either. Alone, not a pack, and something else smaller. Marks. Strange drag patterns, as though something had been carried. Cole followed. Back at the den, the Wolf paced. She didn't know what was coming, only that it was near. She returned to the baby and licked her gently. The child stirred again, weak but still breathing. Still alive? The Wolf curled around her once more. She didn't know if this would be the last time. Her heart beat faster. Her breaths grew shorter. She had lived her whole life by the forest's rules: hunt, protect, survive. But this child had changed something. She had reminded the Wolf of warmth, of meaning, of love without reason. And now, if she must, the Wolf would give everything to protect her. It was just before dusk when Cole spotted the den. At first, he thought he'd imagined it just a dark hole beneath a tree. But then he saw movement, ears, eyes, asterisk a Wolf, a massive gray Wolf. And beside her, bundled in furs and moss and pine needles, a child. Cole froze. The Wolf saw him. She didn't growl, didn't flee. She only stared. Their eyes met, man and beast, and in that silent exchange, something passed between them. An understanding. Cole slowly knelt, lowering himself to the snow. He set down his gloves, pulled back his hood, and whispered, "I won't hurt her." The Wolf didn't move. The baby stirred. Cole's heart cracked. She was alive. He moved slowly, inch by inch, until he was close enough to see her face, to hear her faint breathing. Then finally, the Wolf stood. She looked at the child one last time, then at Cole, and she turned. She didn't run. She simply walked away, back into the forest that had given her birth and taken her children. She didn't look back. In the clearing, under the watchful gaze of ancient trees, man and child were reunited. But the forest would always remember the Wolf who chose love over instinct, sacrifice over survival. The forest, now blanketed in deep snow and silence, bore no trace of what had passed. The wind had already begun erasing the Wolf's paw prints. The trees whispered among themselves again, sharing secrets no human could understand. Ranger Cole Hartley stood in the clearing, cradling the baby in his arms. Her name, he would learn later, was Lily, but at that moment, all he knew was that she was alive. Her skin was cool, lips pale, but she was breathing shallow and faint, like a candle holding on against the storm. Her tiny hand clutched his jacket, and Cole's throat tightened with the realization of what had just occurred. She shouldn't have survived, not out here. Not for 4 days. Not alone, but she hadn't been alone. He glanced once more into the trees, half expecting to see a pair of amber eyes watching from the shadows. But the Wolf was gone. Her mission complete. Cole radioed for a medevac. His voice cracked as he relayed the coordinates. "I found her. I have the baby. She's alive." Static answered at first, then a rush of relieved voices by the time the helicopter blades roared overhead. A crowd had gathered at the edge of the woods. Search teams, paramedics, even a few townsfolk who'd come to help. Some cried at the sight. Others simply stared, open-mouthed. As Cole carried the infant into the light, wrapped in a ranger's thermal jacket, Lily was passed gently into waiting arms. How did you find her? A nurse asked, wide-eyed. In a den, Cole replied quietly. Hidden, safe. He hesitated, then added, a Wolf was with her. The nurse blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly, but Cole didn't elaborate. Not yet. Later. At the hospital, doctors called it a miracle. Lily had signs of hypothermia, dehydration, and mild malnutrition, but no injuries, no bruises, no frostbite. She had been kept warm, remarkably warm, for days in sub-zero temperatures. One nurse whispered to another that it was as if someone had been holding her the entire time. Others suggested she'd been sheltered in the car, hidden in a pocket of warmth. Cole said nothing, because how do you explain something that shouldn't be possible? A Wolf, no. The Wolf had guarded the child, not harmed her, not abandoned her, but shielded her, kept her alive, curled around her like a mother with her cub. No one would believe it. Not fully, but he'd seen the way the child had reached. For the animal, the trust, the familiarity. He had seen her small hand tangled gently in the Wolf's fur. In the weeks that followed, Lily was placed with her aunt and uncle, the only surviving relatives able to care for her. They had tears in their eyes when they held her for the first time, as if they were holding a piece of a miracle. The media had a field day. Miracle baby found in woods after fatal crash. Baby survives 4 days alone in wilderness. Wild instincts. Could a Wolf have saved her life? But the headlines changed with the next storm, the next scandal. People moved on. Only Cole didn't. He returned to the forest every week. Alone, he walked the path back to the den, though it had already begun to collapse in the spring thaw. He left offerings outside it, sometimes a rabbit, a few scraps of meat, not out of belief that the Wolf would return, but out of respect, out of gratitude. The story settled deep in his soul like roots pushing into earth. It became something sacred, a secret he held close. And then, one day in early spring, he saw something, a single paw print. Large, familiar. Fresh. It wasn't near the old den, but farther north by a quiet stream. And beside the print was another smaller, different. Cole crouched slowly, breath catching in his throat. 2 wolves. Back in town, Lily began to grow. Her first words were soft but clear. Her first steps were steady. She was quiet but curious, often staring out windows as if searching for something just beyond the trees. Her aunt noticed she didn't cry at the sound of thunder, or dogs barking, or wind howling at night. Instead, she'd press her hand to the glass and hum to herself. Sometimes, when taken to the edge of the woods, she would stare deeply into the trees, silent and still, until someone called her name. Do you think she remembers? Her uncle asked one night. Her aunt looked toward Lily's room, where the child slept clutching a small toy Wolf someone had given her. Maybe not with her mind, she whispered, but with her heart, I think she does. 1 year later, Cole visited again. It was the anniversary of the crash. Snow had fallen once more, though not as heavy. The forest was quiet, respectful. He found the same clearing, the one where he'd knelt in front of the Wolf. This time he came with nothing in hand, no offering. Just words. He knelt down and whispered into the air. Thank you for keeping her, for saving her. The wind shifted, a rustle in the trees. And for the briefest moment, he swore he saw something in the distance, a silhouette watching from between the pines. Amber eyes glowing like soft lanterns in the dusk. Then it was gone, but he didn't need proof. He had already seen all he needed. In the space between man and beast, something unspoken had passed. A promise kept, a life saved. A story whispered by the trees and remembered by the earth. Years passed, the forest healed. So did the little girl who had once been lost in it. Lily Blake grew not with memories but with instincts. She didn't remember the crash. She didn't remember the cold or the crash of twisted metal or the warmth of the Wolf's body curled around her. But something in her bones remembered. Some part of her soul had been shaped by it. As a child, she was quiet, thoughtful. While other children played games indoors, Lily wandered into her backyard barefoot, standing silently near the tree line, as if listening to something adults could not hear. Sometimes, birds would land near her feet. Once, a red fox watched her for a full minute before darting away. Her aunt often found her talking softly to animals, cats, dogs, squirrels, as though they understood her. Some seemed to. She never feared the dark. She never feared wolves. In fact, she was drawn to them. By the time Lily turned 8, she had read every book she could find about wolves. She filled notebooks with drawings of them, sometimes fierce, sometimes gentle, always with amber eyes that watched with knowing. Her bedroom walls were covered in sketches. Her aunt once asked her why she liked wolves so much. Lily answered without hesitation. Because one saved me. Her aunt froze. Who told you that? No one, Lily said, blinking. I just know. At age 16, Lily volunteered at a wildlife rescue center on the edge of the mountain range. She worked mostly with injured birds and abandoned pets. But the first time a wounded wolf was brought in hit by a car and terrified Lily was. The only one it let near. She approached the cage slowly, calmly, kneeling so she was eye level with it. The wolf growled, trembling, eyes wild. I won't hurt you, she whispered. The growling stopped. Her supervisor watched, stunned, as the animal allowed her to touch it without resistance. Lily's hands moved gently through its fur, and for a moment it pressed its head to her shoulder. By the time Lily was 21, she had become a wildlife biologist, specializing in wolf behavior and conservation. Her thesis was titled The Myth of the Monster, Emotional Intelligence in Wolves, and drew on not just research, but something deeper, an inner knowing she couldn't explain. When asked in interviews why she had chosen this path, Lily always smiled and gave the same answer: because I owe them everything. Some rolled their eyes. Others grew quiet. Only a few remembered the old newspaper story, the baby rescued from a car crash, found alive after 4 days in the forest. Some scoffed at the part about the wolf. Others called it folklore, but Lily believed it. She always had. Every winter on the anniversary of the accident, Lily returned to the forest. She never told anyone where she went. She would hike alone into the quiet, snow-covered woods. Stopping at the place where her parents had died and where she had been saved, the car was long gone. Only a few rusted bolts and shards of glass remained, mostly buried beneath moss and pine needles. But the earth remembered. Lily would kneel there, placing a flower, a white lily, for her name into the snow. Then she'd walk to the old den. It had collapsed years ago, but she could still find the curve of the earth, the moss-covered rocks that had once formed its walls. There, too, she'd leave something, a feather, a pinnacone, or sometimes just a piece of cloth with her scent on. Once, when she was 25, she found paw prints near the old den, large, fresh, too large for a dog, and beside them, a smaller set, not just one wolf. 2. She stood frozen in place, heart thudding, a feeling washing over her like warm wind in a cold room. They're still watching. That night, she dreamed of fur brushing her cheek, of a deep heartbeat lulling her to sleep. She woke up with tears in her eyes. When Lily turned 30, she opened her own wildlife sanctuary, a large stretch of protected land where wolves could roam free, monitored but undisturbed. She named it the Grey Guardian Reserve, though she never explained the name publicly. But if you look closely at the sign at the entrance, there was an etching in the wood, a carving of a wolf curled around a sleeping baby beneath the pines. No words. Just an image. The staff all knew the story. They didn't ask questions. They respected the silence. Children would sometimes visit the reserve on school trips, and Lily would tell them about wolves not as monsters or threats, but as family. Creatures, protectors, thinkers, feelers, are they dangerous? A boy once asked. They can be, she said. Like us, but they're also loyal, brave, and sometimes they're the ones who save us. The boy looked confused, but another girl raised her hand and whispered, Did a wolf save you? Lily paused. Then smiled. Yes, she said, she did. The legacy of the gray wolf was not written in books or carved in stone. It was written in breath, in instinct, in the heartbeat of a child who had once been cradled in fur and watched over by something wild and kind. And every time a wolf was saved, every time fear turned to understanding, her story lived on.